My father created a fake will to steal my mother's $900,000 inheritance and pay off his new wife's secret debts. However, in court, he lost everything, including his marriage. I lost my mom when I was 19. She passed away from an illness she had battled for several years until she finally gave up. In truth, Mom was a fighter, but in her final weeks, she told me she was content with the life she had lived and simply accepted her fate. She owned a jewelry business that she built from the ground up. She started by selling handmade pieces at craft fairs when I was little and eventually opened her own store. By the time she fell ill, she had 2 locations, and the business was doing quite well. My parents divorced when I was 14. My dad remarried a woman I'll call Blair. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter, about 7 months after their divorce was finalized. I never really connected with them. My dad moved into Blair's house across town, and I stayed with Mom in our family home. Initially, I saw him every other weekend, but by the time I was 16, I preferred spending less time with him. He always seemed distracted when we were together, constantly checking his phone for messages from Blair. It wasn't unusual for him to cut our dinners short because she needed him. Mom and I were very close. She taught me how to make jewelry when I was 12. I can't count how many hours we spent in her home workshop. When I turned 17, she showed me how to manage the business's accounting because she wanted me to understand how everything worked. She once told me that the business would be mine someday, and that I needed to know it inside and out. When Mom received her diagnosis, everything changed. She tried to continue working for the first few months, but eventually, she had to hire a manager to run the stores because she was too tired. I was starting my freshman year of college, as she wanted me to get an education first, but I came home every weekend to help out. I know my parents were divorced, but what I'm about to say will be important later. My dad sometimes acted like a friend, but he stopped because, in his words, it was complicated with Blair. My mom updated her will 6 months before she passed away. Her lawyer came to the house, and I was there when she signed everything. She left me the family home, a small cabin we owned in the mountains, her jewelry business, and about $900,000 in savings and investments. She had been careful with money her entire life. The business was thriving, and she lived modestly. The night after signing the will, she told me that if anything happened to her, she wanted me to be well cared for and to take charge of everything. My dad attended the funeral, sitting in the back with Blair and her children. He hugged me afterward and said he was sorry. That was the extent of our conversation that day. I moved into the family home after Mom passed. I was trying to finish my sophomore year of college while coping with grief and figuring out what to do with the business. My mom's manager kept everything running, but there were some operational decisions to be made. I had learned a lot, but not everything. I wished I'd had a few more years with Mom to learn. I still wish I had my mom. My dad started stopping by the house about 5 months after the funeral. He would come over and ask how I was doing. At first, his visits seemed normal. He'd ask about college and my life. But then, instead of asking how I was, he started talking about his problems. How expensive Blair's mortgage was, how her son Cameron would be starting college in the fall, and they were worried about tuition. Blair's ex-husband had left her with almost nothing when they divorced, and she had been struggling financially for years. I just listened, thinking he was simply venting. Then one Sunday, about 6 months after Mom died, he sat me down at the kitchen table and asked me to help his family. He knew Mom had left me a lot of money. He's not foolish. He saw the stores and thought I should consider helping my step-siblings with college tuition. I told him no. Mom had acquired everything through an austere life of saving. I wasn't going to start spending it freely. I intended to follow her example and preserve it for any future eventualities. My dad said it wasn't a time to be selfish, but a time to share. I stood my ground, and he left angry. He returned 2 weeks later, this time with papers. He claimed he had been sifting through old files and found a new will that Mom had signed. According to this attempted scam, Mom made changes just before she died, and this new will supposedly gave him 50% of everything. He handed me copies of the documents, which looked quite genuine if you weren't a lawyer and didn't know what he was trying to pull. The signature resembled Mom's handwriting, but it was off. I called her lawyer the next morning. She had the original will in her files and confirmed there had been no updates after the one I witnessed. If my dad had different documents, she said we needed to examine them immediately. We hired a document expert. When the results came back, The expert determined that the signature had been traced from another document Mom signed years prior. The notary's seal was also fake. Someone had created the will using a template and forged my mom's signature. I called my dad and told him I had proof the will was fake. He started yelling that Mom owed him because she started the business when they were married, despite them having divided their assets equally during the divorce. To him, it wasn't fair that Mom had done well in life after leaving him, while he was drowning in debt due to Blair's poor credit and his stepchildren's expenses. My father claimed they were good friends before she died and that she would have wanted him to have it. This connects to what I mentioned earlier about him trying to be friendly. He finally gave me an ultimatum. If I didn't agree to split everything with him, I would no longer be his daughter. Then he hung up. The lawsuit began a month later. My dad filed a petition in probate court asserting that the new will was legitimate. His lawyer argued that Mom had reconnected with him in her final months and wanted to leave him something. They claimed that this second will represented her true wishes. During that time, my dad ran a campaign to portray me as the wicked daughter who wanted to keep everything for myself. Blair's daughter even messaged me, calling me horrible for trying to keep money that other people supposedly needed. The judge dismissed my dad's case. The expert evidence was clear, and my dad's lawyer couldn't explain how the will had been created or who had notarized it. The judge ordered my dad to pay my legal fees. The total came to $23,000 because they tried to drag it out as long as possible. I suppose they hoped I would get tired and at least give them something. My dad sent me an email 2 days after the ruling. He wrote that I could keep my blood money, and he hoped it made me happy. Since I had chosen money over my own father, he said I now had neither. Then he blocked my number. Blair's son and daughter unfriended me on social media. That was 6 years ago. I'm 28 now. I finished college and took over Mom's business full-time. This was all thanks to my mom, who prioritized my education with the vision that I could eventually help with the business. Since then, I've opened 2 more locations and started selling online. Last year, I sold the mountain cabin as it wasn't being used. I used the money to start a scholarship fund for students who have lost a parent. The fund covers books and other study materials. I also initiated a mentorship program for young women who want to start their own businesses. Last month, I received a message request on Instagram. It was from my dad. He had been following my business updates and saw the announcement about the scholarship fund. He mentioned that he was proud of what I had built and asked if we could meet to talk. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked at his profile. He had only posted a few times in the last year. His most recent photo from 2 months ago showed him alone. It was very unusual that there were no pictures of Blair. I asked some mutual acquaintances what had happened. I learned that Blair had an affair with the neighbor. She and my dad had been separated for 2 months, and their divorce was about to begin. Blair had filed for it and was requesting spousal support, even though she was the one who cheated. In this state, there are no-fault divorces. I understand that people can change, that my father might be a better person now than he was years ago, and that breaking up with Blair might have been good for him. But after what I went through with my father forging documents belonging to my deceased mom, I don't believe in forgiveness. That's why I wrote back telling him not to contact me again, and then I blocked him. I know it's been a complex situation concerning my father, but that's my decision. Edit. I've received comments saying that keeping the money is wrong, that you can't take it to your grave, and similar remarks, often using my mother as an example. But my mother didn't want to take the money to her grave. She wanted to leave it to her daughter. She made many sacrifices for that, and I cannot destroy all of that by squandering the money she worked so hard to earn. If anyone worked long hours every week, it was my mother. On the other hand, I know of cases where people have won or inherited a lot or a little money and watched it disappear in months, ending up worse off than when they received it. I don't want that to happen to me. With Blair and her poor credit score, it's likely they would have done exactly that with my mother's money. And it's not as if Blair, her children, or my father had ever been good to me or my mom. My father did receive a penalty for forging documents. However, he didn't get prison time, only a $5,000 fine and the order to pay my lawyer's fees. Update 1. My father created another account just to send me a huge text explaining the situation. The same one he probably would have wanted to explain if I'd agreed to see him. He started by saying he had been wrong about everything. After my mom died, he panicked because Blair's debts were worse than he had realized. Her ex-husband had left her with $60,000 in credit card debt, which my dad didn't know about until after they got married. He thought the debts were much smaller. Blair's son, Cameron, had gotten into an expensive university, and Blair insisted they find a way to pay for it. They had taken out a second mortgage on their house, and the payments were eating up most of my dad's salary. He was convinced that my mom's inheritance was also rightfully his, but he claimed the fake will was Blair's idea, and he only agreed because he didn't know what else to do. He knew it was wrong. He knew it the whole time, but he was desperate. After losing the lawsuit, he had to take out a personal loan to pay my legal fees and his fine, which led him into even more debt. He blamed me for a long time because it was easier than admitting what he had done. This brings us to now because a coworker's daughter received the scholarship I funded. The coworker showed him the announcement because I share my dad's last name. Seeing what I had done with the money made him realize how badly he had behaved. After that, he spent months trying to figure out what to say to me. Part of why his marriage had fallen apart was financial problems. The other part was my refusal to help them. Blair blamed me, but my dad started defending me in front of her, leading to constant arguments. Eventually, he saw her for who she truly was and couldn't keep pretending anymore. He ended the text by saying he hoped this would make me see him in a different light and agree to a face-to-face conversation. If you're thinking this sounded suspicious, as I did the first time I read it, that's because it is. A few weeks after receiving this, I also got a message from Blair's son. I'll call him Cameron to make it easier for you all. He began by apologizing for how he treated me during the lawsuit. He said he was 17 at the time and believed everything his mom told him. Now he knew that my dad and his mom had lied about what happened. His mom had told him and his sister that I refused to give them any of the money, despite my dad and my mom getting along well until her last days. Cameron didn't learn the truth until 2 years ago when he overheard his mom and my dad arguing. His mom was yelling that my dad had messed up the forgery and it cost them everything. Cameron spoke with my dad after the fight, and my dad finally admitted what they had done. He told me about his life. He finished college and has a pretty good job. He was engaged, but for reasons I won't go into here, he's no longer engaged. His sister lived in another state and is married. Neither of them spoke much with their mom. She had already asked both of them for money over the years and never paid it back. He also mentioned something related to my dad. About a month or more before my dad sent me that long message, Cameron had to go to his mom's house to pick up some belongings that were still there. They were still living in the same house at the time, but sleeping in separate rooms. There, he overheard his mom telling my dad that he needed to fix things with me because now I was full of money and could help them. My dad told her to shut up. She retorted that if he had been smarter with the will, they wouldn't be in this mess. Then they both ended up shouting at each other, each blaming the other for everything. I needed to know if my father was still living at Blair's house, but Cameron hadn't spoken to them since then. I'm sure my father is lying. They might be having their fights and living in separate rooms because of it, but I don't believe he has moved out of the house. I might be paranoid, but it's all thanks to my father going to the extreme of forging a will. It doesn't matter whose idea it was. If my father is capable of that, he's also capable of telling me all this to try another angle to get money from me. I'm grateful to Cameron for deciding to tell me everything. My father had been talking about reconnecting with me, and even though he didn't say it directly to Cameron, he overheard it. That's why he wanted to warn me about what was happening, based on what he heard. In addition to apologizing for how he treated me years ago, I also asked him about his mother's infidelity, but he was surprised because it was the first time he'd heard the rumor. However, he couldn't confirm it for me, given that he doesn't talk much with his mother, and especially not about such topics, for some time now. Update 2. Today, I'm going to make you all very happy because I have so many details that I'm afraid they won't fit into this post. However, you should understand that I haven't spoken to my father, my stepmother, or anyone related to them in a long time. The good thing is that I have a little informant because she's younger than me and has told me some juicy things about my dad and Blair, though now I regret calling her that as the witch didn't seem so bad. My stepsister, whom I'll name Jessica, called me at her brother's insistence. She didn't want to call me either after treating me poorly. She was ashamed of what I might say to her and wanted Cameron to call me instead. However, getting the information directly from the person who actually spoke with Blair and knew some things was more productive. This way, I was able to ask several questions that Cameron wouldn't have been able to answer. Like Cameron, Jessica hadn't spoken much with her mother since the truth came out, perhaps even less than her brother. But for some reason, Blair called Jessica to talk. The divorce is real, and my dad wasn't lying about that. Blair is indeed the one who filed for it, despite being unfaithful. They had lived in the same house for a month after my father discovered the infidelity, more juicy details on that later, and she filed for divorce to demand spousal support. All of that was true, except Blair was calling her daughter to ask for money to pay her lawyer. My father had frozen their accounts, and she had no access to anything. This might be true or not. We only have Blair's version of Blair's. Blair was unfaithful with the neighbor, but not just any neighbor. This one had a large house and apparently had money. He was also married. He took her to dinners in the city and on some business trips where she accompanied him. This is what Blair herself told her daughter. My father discovered this when the man's second mistress, if there were at least two, counting Blair, came to their house. In front of Blair, who didn't know this woman, she introduced herself as this guy's mistress. The conversation went something like this. Mistress 2. Hi, I'm the neighbor's mistress. My father looked strange because he didn't understand why she had come to tell them this. Blair was angry but kept her composure until she knew what was going on. Blair. And what are you doing here? Mistress 2. I just want to tell your husband to be careful now that the neighbor will be left with only one mistress. Blair was visibly annoyed because it was obvious that Mistress 2 knew about Mistress 1, and she tried to kick her out of the house. My father asked who the other mistress was. Mistress 2 replied, Your wife. That started a catfight where Blair ripped off Mistress 2's hair extensions, and Blair ended up with one of her breasts exposed from the struggle. My father managed to separate them, and after making sure Mistress 2 was out of the house, he went to bang on the neighbor's door. By the time he arrived, or perhaps after banging, it's not clear, Mistress 2 reappeared. Her first stop had been Blair's house. The second was the neighbor's and his wife's. The neighbor wasn't home, which could have caused chaos throughout the entire neighborhood, but Mistress 2 and my dad told the neighbor's wife what was happening. Blair was behind them, yelling at my dad not to say anything, to come back inside, and that Mistress 2 was lying. But Mistress 2 yelled back, Shut up, bitch! When the neighbor's wife emerged from the commotion, she not only screamed at Blair to shut up, but also at Mistress 2. Then she demanded that everyone leave her property. No one knows what happened after that, but Blair saw her throwing her husband's clothes out the door, not in boxes, but directly onto the street. My father moved into the guest room and eventually moved out of the house, which brings us to the message he sent me and the call where Blair needed more money for the divorce. That's because the neighbor's wife was suing her, as was Mistress 2 for the fight, and Blair was countersuing them both. When Jessica finished telling me all this, I asked her to repeat it because it was the most astonishing story anyone had ever told me over the phone. Regarding the request for help, Jessica refused to give her mother money and blocked her after what happened. But, as Cameron thought, the information might interest me because it was related to my dad. Although, to be honest with you all, I found everything that happened that day more interesting than whether my father was telling the truth or not. I was wrong to think my father was lying and that he was still with Blair, but I hope I wasn't wrong to post this update. I enjoyed it. I don't know about you. Update 3. I hope it's clear. No matter what my dad has suffered, forging a will to take money from your own daughter should be punishable by public flogging. I genuinely don't feel sorry for him. This is something he brought upon himself. I don't know how else to say it, because it seems a heartfelt message from his lowest point is enough to make me seem cruel for not forgiving him. It's not even his lowest point. It's his karma. He still has a lot further to fall. My father returned with another message from a new account. Lucky for him that he can create accounts with his name followed by infinite numbers. He was asking if I had read his previous message and if I had an answer for him. I don't know if messages are marked as read when sent from newly added accounts, but if he saw that I had blocked him, that should give him his answer. I only responded because I was curious about the details of the story my stepsister told me. I recommend reading my previous post before continuing. This is the extra information and some corrections my father made. Blair seemed surprised by Mistress 2 from the moment she arrived at the house, so my dad was sure she knew her and that she truly was the other mistress. I'll continue to call her Mistress 2 to avoid confusion. Mistress 2 knew the neighbor was married, but she didn't know about his second mistress. That's what made her angry. People who date married individuals have their limits, you know? The fight between them lasted a good 15 minutes. They destroyed part of the living room, where Blair threw Mistress 2 onto a table that broke apart. Perhaps I should clarify here, as it's important for this detail, that both women were heavy-set. They weren't two 90-pound teenagers. That's why the table gave way under Mistress Two's weight. Mistress Two managed to rip what Blair was wearing. That's why Blair was late for the meeting with the neighbor's wife, my dad, and Mistress Two. Mistress Two held her hair extensions in her hand throughout that entire conversation. The neighbor's belongings that his wife threw out weren't just clothes. There was also a destroyed tennis racket and some other shattered valuables. And I think that was all. Blair is being sued by the neighbor's wife for alienation of affection and for interfering with a marriage, and by Mistress Two for the beating. Blair is also countersuing Mistress Two for the same reasons. In the divorce, my father is fighting not to pay spousal support, but infidelity doesn't count as a reason to withhold it in this state. The neighbor knows nothing because he had to move out of the house after his wife found out. And judging by the reaction of the neighbor's wife, who always greets Blair with her middle finger, I don't think she's open to telling Blair how his things are. After that, I blocked him again. But I expect the next Dad72 name in my near future. Update 4. Before we get to the update, we need to talk about the betting pool on what number my father would stop at. I want to clarify that I am not affiliated with it and have not accepted money from anyone. This is just in case the police are reading and think I'm running an illegal betting ring, one that uses people with rights for betting instead of animals. And for those curious, the last number was 7. He stopped after I didn't respond and just blocked the latest accounts. I spoke with my step-siblings who, in one way or another, have been receiving news from their mother or my dad. My father was able to avoid paying spousal support, even though he disagreed with the divorce. None of the three of us knows if it was because it was unfair, or just because no one likes divorce settlements. He's been calling Cameron and Jessica like crazy, referring to himself as their dad. Sometimes I'm thankful for owning jewelry stores because they are heavily guarded by the security service we hired. And that has probably prevented my father from doing something foolish. Blair was able to avoid the alienation of affection charge only because that legal concept was almost obsolete, and it would have been impossible for the wife, or ex-wife now, to win such a lawsuit. However, she did lose against Mistress Two. It seems Blair knows how to fight, as she caused Mistress Two some more serious injuries than Mistress Two inflicted on her. She lost for an amount ranging from a few thousand to $10,000. She's vague whenever she recounts it, so she tells everyone a different figure. This means her countersuit was dismissed. Her house has either been sold or repossessed by the bank because it was double mortgaged. My dad, despite avoiding spousal support payments, has a significant number of maxed-out credit cards with debts totaling several thousands, so he's emerged from his marriage with debts and mistresses fighting, though not over him.